I was setting 2 cups on the kitchen table when I heard Emily's voice tear through the garden. "Noah, run!" My hand slipped. Porcelain rang on tile. I opened the back door and froze. Noah's small feet pounded the path toward me. Emily wasn't running. She stood between him and whatever hid beyond the fence, both hands raised like a shield. I took my grandson's hand. We didn't speak. We just moved. I'm so glad you're here. If you're listening, please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. My name is Margaret Lewis, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in this small brick house for more than 40 years. Its walls still hold the scent of old coffee, lemon polish, and the laughter of people who aren't here anymore. After my husband Richard died, I used to think silence would finish me before loneliness ever could. The clock ticked louder than breathing, and even the floorboards seemed to groan for company. But when my son David moved back home with his wife Emily and their little boy Noah, the quiet finally ended. Suddenly the mornings were alive again, cereal bowls clinking, doors opening and closing, tiny socks left where they didn't belong. I would wake to the hum of voices instead of the echo of my own thoughts. For the first time in years, the house felt young again. I told myself I'd been given a second chance at family. Maybe peace wasn't silence at all. Maybe it was noise you loved. Our mornings had a rhythm only families understand. David always rushed, tying his tie with one hand while gulping coffee with the other. Emily would stand by the counter, scrolling through her phone, smiling at something unseen. I'd be by the stove, frying eggs, pretending not to notice how often she glanced toward the back window. And Noah, my sunshine, would come running down the hallway, hair sticking up in every direction, clutching his stuffed bear by one ear. "Grandma," he'd say, breathless, "guess what I dreamed last night?" No matter what I was doing, I'd stop to listen. Dragons, pirates, monsters, sometimes angels. Every dream was an epic in his tiny voice. When he was done, I'd whisper, "Then we'd better make pancakes for heroes, hadn't we?" He'd nod solemnly, as if that settled everything. The smell of syrup, the way he'd swing his feet under the table, the soft scrape of his fork, it all felt like home coming back to life. Afternoons were slower. I liked to sit on the porch swing Richard built, watching Noah chase butterflies across the yard. The swing creaked the same way it used to when my husband sat beside me, and sometimes I'd close my eyes just to hear that sound again. Emily would join us now and then, snapping pictures of Noah with her phone, laughing when he struck his little poses. She was kind, always polite, always helping with the dishes, but her laughter never lasted long. More than once, I caught her wiping her eyes before she thought anyone could see. I wanted to ask, but didn't. Every woman carries something she doesn't speak of. I figured if she needed to tell me, she would. Still, sometimes at night I'd hear her pacing downstairs, her voice low on the phone, words too soft to catch. I told myself it was work, or maybe her mother. But a mother's heart notices what others ignore, and something inside me began to keep watch without meaning to. Evenings were my favorite part of the day. David would come home tired but cheerful. Emily served dinner with quiet care, perfectly arranged plates, napkins folded into triangles. Noah would talk about school, about the teacher who wore shiny shoes, about the boy who could whistle with 2 fingers. After dinner, I'd wash the dishes while Emily dried. Sometimes she hummed under her breath, tiny broken melodies that didn't sound familiar. When the kitchen lights dimmed, I'd take Noah upstairs. Bedtime was our little world. One story, one prayer, one secret handshake. "Grandma," he'd whisper once the light was off, "do angels really watch us?" "Of course they do, sweetheart. Even when we're scared? Especially then." He'd smile, eyes half closed, and I'd smooth the blanket over his shoulders. In those quiet minutes, the house always felt full of love, of memory, of something too precious to name. Emily would come in after me, sit beside him, and whisper something too low for me to hear. Her face in the dim light looked both young and ancient, like someone carrying a story she couldn't tell yet. When she left the room, I sometimes saw tears on her cheeks. "I'm fine, Mom," she'd say if I asked, "just tired." I believed her because I wanted to. Life seemed steady again, predictable, safe. But peace can be deceptive. It hums so softly you stop noticing its cracks. Some nights, after everyone went to bed, I'd stand by the living room window looking out at the yard. Noah's toys lay scattered across the grass, the red truck tipped on its side, the plastic shovel half buried in dirt. The moonlight made them shine like relics of a happier world. The house behind me was quiet, but not in the comforting way. It was the kind of quiet that listens back. I could feel it sometimes, the air holding its breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. I'd shake it off, tell myself not to be dramatic. "Peace is a blessing, Margaret," I'd whisper. "Be grateful." And yet, that night, as the clock ticked toward midnight and the wind brushed against the windows, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if the silence I'd prayed for was warning me instead? I smiled at the notion, blew out the candle, and turned toward my room. If I'd known what waited beyond that peaceful night, if I'd known how quickly love could turn to fear, I might have listened to the silence a little closer. But I didn't. And by morning, everything I thought I knew about safety would be gone. The next few weeks slipped by like soft rain, ordinary on the surface, yet something in the air had changed. It began with small things, the kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. Noah stopped talking about his dreams. He'd sit at breakfast tracing circles in his cereal bowl, eyes drifting toward the window instead of my face. When I asked if he felt all right, he'd nod too quickly, the way children do when they want to keep a secret. Emily, meanwhile, moved through the days as if carrying an invisible weight. She'd pour milk and forget to put the cap back on. Once, she left the oven on for an hour after baking muffins, staring at nothing until the smell turned sharp. When I pointed it out, she laughed, too brightly, and said, "Guess I'm losing my mind." Then she turned away before I could answer. I told myself it was exhaustion. We all get tired. But somewhere deep inside, a little voice whispered, "No, Margaret, this is different." One Thursday afternoon, I walked past the kitchen and heard her on the phone. Her tone wasn't tired anymore. It was frightened. She spoke in a whisper that shook. "No, not yet. He can't know. Please, just promise me it'll be over soon." There was a pause, then the soft clatter of the phone being set down. By the time I stepped inside, she was smiling again, stirring soup like nothing had happened. I almost asked who she'd been talking to. Almost, but I didn't. Because sometimes we choose ignorance. It feels safer than truth. That night, Noah asked me, "Grandma, why does Mommy cry in the kitchen?" I froze with the book still open in my lap. He looked at me with those clear eyes that never lied. I wanted to tell him she was just tired, that grown-ups cry for silly reasons, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "Sometimes people cry because they're brave, sweetheart. Even brave people need to cry." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Children sense the things adults hide. A few days later, I started noticing other oddities. Emily locked her bedroom door now. She never used to. Every window in the house was checked twice before bed, and the curtains in the living room stayed closed, even in daylight. One morning, I found Noah's backpack outside near the porch steps, soaked from last night's rain. He swore he hadn't taken it out. I hung it by the radiator to dry, but something about it unsettled me. The zipper half open, a few crayons missing. It felt like a message left by mistake. That evening, when I went to close the hallway door, it creaked. A long, dragging sound, low and deliberate. I smiled at my own foolishness. Houses talk when they grow old, don't they? Still, the sound followed me even after I'd shut the door. On Sunday, I finally asked. We were folding laundry together. warm sheets between our hands, the afternoon light falling through the window. "Emily," I said softly, "are you sure you're all right?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway as if checking whether someone was listening. Then she smiled, small and strained. "I'm fine, Mom. Just work stress. Nothing serious." But when she reached for another towel, her fingers trembled. The fabric slipped from her grasp and fell to the floor. I bent to pick it up, pretending not to notice. That night, I mentioned it to David. He sighed, already half distracted by his phone. "Mom, she's been anxious lately. Don't worry about it, okay? You always imagine the worst." I nodded because arguing wouldn't change anything. But I wasn't imagining it. I knew what fear looked like, and Emily was wearing it like perfume. Faint, constant, impossible to wash away. A week later, I was sitting in the living room knitting when I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, careful. Too heavy to be Noah's, too measured to be David's. I turned off the lamp and listened. Nothing. Only the wind pressing against the windows, the old boards settling. In the morning, I found a small dent on the back gate, fresh, as if someone had forced it open and closed again. When I told David, he shrugged. Probably raccoons. But raccoons don't close gates behind them. The tension became a presence of its own, hovering between the walls. Even Noah started whispering when he played, building block towers in silence. Once he came to me holding a drawing, a stick figure family with a dark shape standing behind them. He said, "That's Mommy's friend, but she doesn't want you to see him." I laughed gently, the way adults do to chase away things they can't explain, but the paper shook in my hands long after he'd gone to bed. That evening I sat at the kitchen table staring at an old photo, Richard holding baby David on the porch swing. He looked so steady, so certain. "If you were here," I whispered, "you'd know what to do." The house gave no answer, only that same faint creak from the hallway door. I'd told myself for weeks it was the wind, but that night, when I stepped into the hall, the air was still. The door moved again. Just a little. Like someone on the other side was testing how far it would go before I noticed. My heart began to beat in my ears. I took one step forward. The door stopped. Another step. And then silence. I reached out, laid my palm against the wood. Cold. Too cold for a door inside a warm house. I didn't open it. I don't know why. Maybe because something deep in my bones told me that once I did, nothing in my life would ever feel ordinary again. So I turned away, forcing myself to breathe, whispering the same lie I'd been telling for weeks. "It's nothing. You're being silly, Margaret." But when I looked back, the door had moved half an inch, just enough to show the darkness waiting behind it. And that was the moment I knew. Whatever peace we'd been living in wasn't peace at all. It was a pause, the quiet heartbeat before a scream. That morning began so calmly it almost feels unreal now. The air smelled of wet earth from last night's rain, and sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles in pale gold squares. I was packing Noah's lunchbox, humming a tune I couldn't remember the name of. Emily was outside hanging laundry, her voice floating faintly through the open window as she talked to Noah near the garden. Everything ordinary, everything safe. Then came the scream. It wasn't the kind of cry you mistake for play. It tore through the air like something alive, raw, urgent, commanding. "Noah, run!" The knife in my hand slipped. It clattered to the floor. For a moment, I didn't move. The sound of that single word, "run," still vibrated in my chest when I reached the back door. Noah's small footsteps thundered across the patio. His face was white, eyes huge, mouth open but no sound coming out. Behind him, Emily stood frozen halfway between the fence and the garden gate. Her arms were spread, palms outward like she was trying to block someone I couldn't yet see. I pushed the door wide. "Emily?" She didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed past me, toward the kitchen. No, not at me, but behind me, as though danger had more than one direction. The stillness before the next second felt endless. Then Noah crashed into me, sobbing. I grabbed him, turned, and saw a man. At the edge of the yard, near the gate we'd found dented a week earlier. Tall, coat dark with rainwater, face half shadowed by a hood. Something gleamed in his hand. A crowbar, maybe, or just metal catching light. He took one slow step forward. Emily shouted again, hoarse this time. "Get inside! Lock the door!" I pulled Noah behind me, but my body wouldn't move fast enough. My knees felt locked, the world narrowing to the thud of my heartbeat. The man didn't run. He just looked at us, then at Emily, and said something I couldn't hear. She flinched like the words had struck her. I slammed the door. The sound shook the whole frame. My hands fumbled for the latch, twisting it twice before realizing it was already locked. Noah was crying, his voice high and broken. "Grandma, he's back. Mommy said he wouldn't come back." I grabbed his shoulders. "Who, honey? Who is he?" But he only shook his head and pressed his face into my apron. Outside, silence returned, thicker than before. I waited for a knock that didn't come. Minutes passed, or maybe only seconds. When I finally dared to look through the window, the yard was empty. The laundry Emily had been hanging fluttered on the line, one sleeve torn loose, twisting like a white flag. Then I saw her. She was kneeling by the fence, clutching something close to her chest. Her shoulders trembled, but not from cold. I rushed outside before my fear could argue. "Noah, stay here," I said. He didn't move from the doorway. The grass squelched under my shoes as I crossed the yard. "Emily!" She didn't lift her head until I was beside her. There was blood on her hands, just a smear, but enough to steal my breath. She turned toward me, eyes wide and bright with tears. "Don't call David," she whispered. "Please, not yet." I stared at her, at the empty gate beyond. Who was that man? Her answer came so quiet I almost missed it. Someone I thought was gone. Then she stood and walked toward the house like a woman underwater, slow, deliberate, detached from gravity itself. Inside, I made tea, because that's what people do when they don't know what else can hold them together. The cup rattled against the saucer as I set it in front of her. She didn't touch it. Noah clung to my arm. "Grandma, Mommy said the bad man wanted to talk to you." Emily's head snapped up. "Noah, stop." But it was too late. I looked between them, confusion turning to a chill that no warmth could fix. "Talk to me. Why me?" Emily pressed both hands to her temples. "Please, Mom. Not now. I'll explain everything later." Later never comes easy in stories like these. The police arrived within 15 minutes. It was David who called them, not me. He came home early, saw the state we were in, and dialed before Emily could stop him. She gave her statement with the blank calm of someone reading lines she'd rehearsed. "A man trespassed. I screamed. He ran away." The officer asked if she recognized him. She said no, but her fingers twisted the hem of her sleeve the entire time. When they left, David hugged her. "You did the right thing." She nodded without looking at him. That night, after everyone finally went to bed, I stood alone in the kitchen. The porch light cast a pale circle through the window, and in that light I saw footprints, muddy, overlapping, leading from the gate straight to the back door. They stopped there. No prints turning back, none leading away. The gate was closed, the yard empty. And yet, when I opened the door just enough to breathe the night air, I could smell tobacco, fresh, strong, close. Richard had smoked the same brand. I closed the door again, my heart caught somewhere between past and present, because suddenly I was sure of two things. The man hadn't come to rob us, and Emily knew exactly who he was. Sleep didn't visit me that night. Every sound the house made felt deliberate, as if the walls were learning to whisper. Once near dawn, I thought I heard the back door creak again. Only once. Then silence. I sat upright in bed until light filled the room. By breakfast, Emily was gone. Her phone left on the counter, her jacket missing from the hook. No note, no explanation. David tried to call her coworkers. No one had seen her. Noah sat at the table, pale and quiet. When I asked if he'd heard anything in the night, he said only this. Mommy said she had to go help her brother. She said she'd be back before he knocks again. I didn't understand what that meant then, but I would, soon. The morning after Emily disappeared felt wrong from the first breath I took. The house smelled of cold toast and worry. David moved through the kitchen like a ghost, searching drawers for his car keys, opening and closing the same one 3 times before realizing they were already in his hand. Noah sat at the table, still in his pajamas, a spoon resting in his cereal bowl untouched. His eyes looked older somehow, as if the night had stolen a piece of his childhood. David kept saying the same thing over and over. "She'll come back, Mom. She just needs space." But even as he said it, his voice kept shrinking until the words were nothing more than air. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe everything was still fixable. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. Mothers don't walk away from their children without a reason that cuts deep. By noon, 2 police officers were back at the house. They asked questions that sounded kind but landed like accusations. Had Emily mentioned anyone threatening her? Did she have mental health issues? Could she have run off with someone? David tried to answer, his hands gripping the edge of the table. No, she'd never do that. His voice cracked on the word, never. I sat quietly until one of the officers turned to me. "Mrs. Lewis, did you notice anything unusual before she went missing?" Unusual. Such a small word for so many things. I thought about the locked doors, the whispers on the phone, the bloody smear on her hand, the footprints that stopped at the door. But the words tangled inside me. Finally, I said, "She was afraid of something. I just don't know what." They wrote it down as if fear were a simple fact, like height or hair color. That night, the house didn't sleep. The clock ticked louder. Noah called out for his mother twice, and both times I went to his room, smoothing his hair, whispering lies I prayed might become true. "She'll be home soon, sweetheart. She just went to fix something important." He looked at me, eyes wet and tired. "Grandma, if she's fixing it, does that mean it's broken?" I couldn't answer. After he fell asleep, I went downstairs for tea I didn't really want. The kitchen light felt too bright, the shadows too long. On the counter lay Emily's phone, still where she'd left it. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There were only 3 messages from the past week, all from the same number. No name saved, just a string of digits. Each message short, each one a warning. "He's out. Don't tell them. Be ready when he knocks." My hands went cold. The last message was sent the night before she disappeared. I printed the number on a slip of paper, hid it inside my Bible, and locked her phone in my drawer. I told myself I'd give it to the police in the morning, but deep down I already knew I wouldn't. Not yet, because some part of me had begun to suspect that whatever Emily had been protecting us from might be something my own family had started. David tried to stay strong. He went to work, answered calls, arranged for a search team. But guilt changes a person's walk. It bends the shoulders, slows the breath. One evening, he came home later than usual. His tie was loose, his eyes red. I asked if the police had found anything. He shook his head, dropped his briefcase by the door, and poured himself a drink before answering. "Mom, they think maybe she left because of money trouble." "What trouble?" He hesitated. "There was an investment a few years ago. I thought it was clean, but the man running it, he scammed people. Emily's brother was involved. He took the blame when the company fell apart, went to prison for a while." He rubbed his face. "She never forgave me for that." My stomach turned to ice. "The man who came to the gate, was that her brother?" "I don't know." His eyes darted away from mine, and that was answer enough. The days blurred together after that. The neighbors stopped coming by. The police checked in less often. It was as if everyone had quietly agreed that Emily was gone for good. But I couldn't. I'd see her coat missing from the hook, and my mind would fill the space with her, walking up the driveway saying she was sorry for worrying us. I could almost hear her voice. Then one evening, as Noah and I watched the sunset from the porch, he tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, look." Across the street, a car idled by the curb. The same white sedan I'd seen once before. Weeks earlier, the day Emily said it's handled. A man sat inside, head tilted down, face hidden by the visor. Before I could move, the engine started and the car pulled away. Noah whispered, "That's him." I felt the world tilt a little. "You've seen him before?" He nodded. "He talks to Mommy when you're asleep." That night, I couldn't shake the sound of tires on gravel. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. I tried to pray, but my thoughts scattered like dry leaves. Around midnight, I walked to the window and looked outside. The yard was still, moonlight on the swing, the garden fence casting long shadows. But on the porch table lay something that hadn't been there before, an envelope plain and wet from dew. I stepped out, the air sharp with cold. Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper, folded twice. 4 words written in Emily's careful handwriting. He wants the truth. Nothing else. No signature. No address. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Behind me, the hallway door gave a soft, familiar creak, the same sound that had haunted me for weeks. This time, I didn't look back, because suddenly I knew that the door wasn't warning me anymore. It was calling me. That was the night I realized the danger wasn't outside the house. It was already here, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to open the right door. And for the first time since Emily screamed, "Run!" I knew exactly what I had to do next. I didn't sleep after finding the envelope. I set it on the table, stared at those 4 words until they felt like something spoken aloud. He wants the truth. Who was he? The man by the gate, or David's past coming back with a face? I made a pot of coffee I never drank, washed a cup I never used, and waited for the sun to make my fear look smaller. It didn't. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I took Emily's phone from the drawer where I'd hidden it, copied the number from those 3 messages onto an index card, and put the phone back where no one would find it. Then I did something I haven't done in years. I left a note on the counter for David. Taking Noah to the library, back by noon. Mom. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. At the library, I settled Noah in the children's corner with a stack of truck books and a librarian who knows him by name. "An hour?" I asked. She patted his shoulder. "Take 2. I thanked her and stepped outside to the payphone near the bus stop. I didn't want my call on our bill. I didn't want this number to touch our house in any way. I dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. A man answered, a quiet voice. "Yes." "I found your number," I said, "on my daughter-in-law's phone. I think you know who I am." There was a pause, not of surprise, but of calculation. "Where are you?" "In public, as you should be too." Another pause. "Corner of Ash and 3rd, the diner, in 20 minutes. The line went dead. I stood there holding a silent receiver and felt older than my years. The diner smelled like grease and coffee and things that stain a table forever. I picked a booth by the window. He slid into the seat across from me 3 minutes late. The hood from my yard traded for a coat and a cap anyone could wear. Up close, he looked less like a threat and more like a man who hadn't slept in days. His jaw was dark with stubble, his eyes the kind that scan exits by habit. He didn't touch the menu. "Margaret," he said, as if trying the weight of my name. "I'm Mark, Emily's brother." My breath left me in a sound I hoped he didn't hear. He watched me carefully, the way a person watches a door that might open the wrong way. "You scared my grandson," I said. "I saved him," he replied. No bravado, just a flat fact. "I told Emily I wouldn't step inside. I told her I just needed you to listen, but she was scared you'd call the police before you heard me." Why come to my fence at all? Because your son won't return calls. Because the man who ruined my life used to sit at that very table and laugh about risk. My hands tightened around the napkin. David. He didn't flinch. David and his friend Hale. Victor Hale. The wrong number. Weeks ago, Mrs. Hale flashed through my mind like lightning that chooses where to land. I said nothing. He slid a folded paper across the table. Read. It was a scan of a notarized document. Familiar letterhead, dates from 4 years ago. A signature that looked like Mark's name but not his hand. The language was simple. He would personally guarantee a set of bridge loans for a project run by Victor. Below, an addendum referenced David as consultant, a word that can mean anything you want it to. I didn't sign that, Mark said. I was the one who went to prison when it collapsed. David told the investigators I recruited him. He let me take the fall. Why would he do that? Because he had a family and a promotion, and you and I... He exhaled, a sound like surrender. I already had a record from fights I shouldn't have picked when I was a kid. He told Emily he'd fix it quietly if I stayed quiet. He didn't. I looked up. And Emily? She married your son anyway. She thought love could wash anything clean. He rubbed his thumb along a coffee stain on the laminate. When the appeals failed, she started collecting proof, notes, emails. The notary who stamped that paper moved towns, but not far enough. Emily found her. The woman admitted she'd stamped signatures for Victor before, paid cash, no questions. Then why the fence? Why scare Noah? He shook his head. I went there to warn you. Hale is back in town. He's been leaning on David, money, old favors. Emily begged me to stay gone until she had the last piece. What piece? The ledger, David's. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He kept it, Mark said softly, studying my face. People like David always do. They tell themselves it's to protect their own. But really, it's because they can't let go of the story where they're still the good guy. I thought of the hallway door that creaked when the house held its breath, the way David avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions, the quiet way Emily dried dishes and blinked tears she didn't want anyone to see. Where? I asked. In the house, he said. He told me once, when we were still pretending to be brothers. Files should stay where you can see them, so you remember who you are. Check the study. Hollow behind pictures, floorboards, a safe maybe. He isn't clever. He's careful. What happens if I find it? Then you'll have the truth you think you want. He leaned back, the seat groaning softly. But truth isn't a door you open and stand behind. It's a wind. It moves things you didn't mean to move. The waitress came by. We both said we were fine. When she left, I asked the question that had been pressing against my ribs since the yard. Are you going to hurt my son? He looked at me for a long time. No, I'm going to make him say my name in a room where it matters. He stood then, slid a small key onto the table. If he used the cheap safe I think he did, this will open it. If he didn't, throw it away and call me. He tapped the index card where I'd written his number. You kept the messages. That's good. Don't give the phone to the police yet. They'll move too fast and break the only thing that can save Emily when she comes back. When? I repeated. When? He said, as if promising himself too. He left without turning around. I sat there until the coffee grew cold and my hands stopped shaking. Back home, I tucked Noah in for a nap. He asked if his mom would be home by dinner. I said maybe. The lie tasted like metal. David wasn't back yet. I had time. I walked to the hallway and stood before the door that had been creaking at the edge of my nights. I pressed my palm to the wood. It felt warmer than it had before, as if the truth inside had its own temperature. I opened it. The study smelled like paper and old cologne. David kept everything neat. Frames measured precisely on the wall, books squared to the shelf edge, pens aligned in a row. That kind of neat is its own kind of noise. I went to the largest framed photo, David shaking hands with a man in a gray suit at some charity gala. The caption plate polished, Community Leadership Award. The man beside him smiled too widely for a man who gave things away. Victor Hale. I slid the frame up and off its nail. The wallpaper behind it was newer, a shade brighter. I pressed along the plaster. One spot sounded duller than the rest. I pulled gently at the seam. A square of board came away to reveal a small black safe, the kind men buy when they want to feel better about their secrets. The key Mark had given me slid in and turned with a sound you don't forget. Inside, a bound ledger with a cracked spine, a flash drive taped into its back cover, and a thin envelope of loose papers. On top, a photo I had never seen. David and Hale standing with a third man whose face was turned just enough to avoid the camera. In the corner, Emily's handwriting in pencil. Same night as wire. I opened the ledger. Dates, amounts, initials, MH beside transactions that matched the months Mark had testified he'd never met Hale. DL. By consulting fees that didn't match any job David had ever told me about. Receipts copied and stapled like trophies. The envelope held a notarized statement, the same notary claiming fund custody had been transferred to a bridge guarantor whose name had been redacted with a marker, and then, years later, scanned anyway. Under the black lines, the letters bled through faintly. Mark Hart. I sat down in David's chair. The house was very quiet. I could hear Noah breathing through the floor. Somewhere, a car door closed out on the street. Every old thing in the house listened with me. I closed the ledger, slid it into my bag, and replaced the safe cover and frame exactly as they'd been. When I turned to leave, I saw something on the desk I'd missed. A business card tucked under a paperweight. V. Hale, Capital Partners. A number. A local address scribbled on the back. The study door creaked when I opened it. It sounded different now, like a throat cleared before confession. I stepped into the hallway with the bag on my shoulder and nearly collided with David. He stood there holding his tie in one hand, his expression a mask he hadn't had time to fasten. "Mom," he said, eyes dropping to the strap on my shoulder. "What are you doing in my office?" "Cleaning," I said. My voice sounded calm. It surprised me. He glanced past me toward the desk, then back to my face. He tried to smile. It tugged at only one side of his mouth. "You never come in here." I should have long ago. His throat worked. "Where's Noah?" "Asleep." We stood there like two people who have known each other forever and were just now meeting. I reached into my bag and took out the business card. Not the ledger. I held it between two fingers. "Who is Victor Hale, David?" He looked at the card, and all the practiced answers he'd prepared fell out of his eyes at once. He didn't speak. He didn't have to, because the truth had already walked into the room. By evening, the house had drawn its curtains of silence. The air had weight. Every sound, the refrigerator hum, the soft click of pipes, felt like something listening back. David hadn't mentioned the office again. He pretended the day had drained him, dropped his shoes by the door, and moved through the kitchen like a man rehearsing peace. He poured a drink, sat on the couch, and turned on the muted news. I watched him from the hallway, the bag still resting on the table where I'd left it. The safe key glinted inside like a tiny piece of gilt. He didn't ask about it. That was answer enough. When Noah was asleep, I turned off the lights in the living room one by one. David sat motionless, his face lit only by the blue of the screen. "Long day," he murmured. I nodded. "They're all long lately." He took a slow sip. "Did you talk to the police again?" "Not yet," I said. "Did you?" "No." He looked at the TV, not me. "They keep calling. I don't know what else to tell them." The silence between us thickened until it felt like another person in the room. Later, when the house should have been sleeping, I heard movement again, the same creak from the study floor. Only this time, it wasn't hesitation. It was urgency. I rose quietly, stepped into the hall, and followed the faint glow leaking from under the study door. The handle turned before I could touch it. David stepped out. a folder pressed tight under his arm. His face froze when he saw me standing there. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, "what are you doing?" "Work," he said too quickly. "Couldn't sleep." The smell of cigarette smoke clung to the papers. He hadn't smoked in 10 years. He tried to move past me. I stayed where I was. "You don't have to lie anymore," I said softly. He stopped. "What do you mean?" I reached behind me, lifted the envelope from the table, and handed him the business card. He came back. "Hale, you still work with him, don't you?" David's jaw clenched, the folder trembling in his grip. "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand enough," I said. "Emily was scared. She found out. That's why she's gone." He shook his head, anger and panic twisting together. "No, you're wrong. She left because she couldn't handle what she'd done." What she'd done. He exhaled hard, as if the truth were too heavy to keep inside. "She took it," he said. "The ledger. I came home that night. It was gone. I think she meant to turn it in, but she didn't know Hale. He doesn't let people walk away." He rubbed his eyes, his voice collapsing to a whisper. "He called me, said she'd come to him for answers, said he'd take care of it." The words sank like stones. Take care of it how? He didn't answer. That was the moment I realized my son wasn't the villain of the story. He was the coward who'd watched it unfold and prayed not to be written in. I took a step closer. "You need to tell the police everything. Tonight." His laugh came out broken. "And say what, Mom? That I helped a criminal and let my wife disappear?" I looked at him, at the man I'd raised, and felt both love and sorrow burn through the same vein. "Then you'll lose Leo too," I said quietly. "Because when he's old enough to ask, I won't lie for you." He turned away, set the folder down, and pressed his hands against the desk as if trying to hold himself steady. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The house listened, the way it always did. Then his phone buzzed on the desk. One message, a number I didn't recognize. He read it once, and the blood drained from his face. He showed me the screen. "It's done. Check the river." I felt the room tilt. David dropped the phone, stumbled to the chair. His voice cracked. "No, no, God, no." The sound tore through the house and woke Noah upstairs. I ran to the stairs before he could see his father like that. "Go back to sleep, honey," I whispered. But my voice trembled. Behind me, David sat in the dark, his shoulders shaking, whispering the same thing over and over. She just wanted to protect him. She just wanted to protect him. When the police came the next morning, it wasn't because we called. A fisherman had. They found Emily's car near the bridge 3 miles east. The river had been high that night. Her bag was inside, but the driver's seat was empty. For 3 days, the search teams worked the banks. David stayed silent, answering only when spoken to, his eyes hollow. They found her on the 4th day, caught between 2 fallen branches. She was still wearing the bracelet Leo made her for Mother's Day. The funeral was small. Gray skies, muted prayers. Noah clutched my hand the entire time, asking when Mommy would wake up. David stood apart, a man surrounded by people, but unreachable. When everyone left, I stayed until the last shovel of earth covered her name. I placed the folded note she'd written, "He wants the truth," on the grave. Then I whispered, "You got it, darling," but it cost too much. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the study again. The ledger lay open in front of me, the flash drive beside it. I thought of Mark, of his quiet voice saying, "Truth is a wind." I turned on David's computer and plugged in the drive. Dozens of files appeared, records, transactions, names, and one folder titled Insurance. Inside were photographs, Hale shaking hands with city officials, documents showing payments, offshore accounts, everything a prosecutor would need. I copied them all, sent them anonymously to the detective who'd handled Emily's case. Then I deleted the originals. By dawn, the house was quiet again. No footsteps, no creaking doors, only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Noah breathing upstairs. When David came down, He didn't look at me. He sat at the table, poured coffee he didn't drink, and whispered, "What did you do?" "I did what your wife couldn't," I said. "I told the truth." He looked up at me, tears slipping down his face. "Mom, they'll come for me." "Maybe," I said, "but they'll come for him first." Outside, sirens began to rise, distant, growing louder, and for the first time in months, I felt the house exhale. The house feels different now, not quieter, just emptied of the kind of silence that hides things. There's air in the walls again, light in corners that used to hold secrets. After the sirens came, everything moved fast. Police cars, questions. David's voice cracking as he tried to explain what couldn't be explained anymore. By the time the sun rose, the story had already left our home and entered the mouths of strangers. Headlines, statements, truth stripped down to words that could fit in print. They took David away that morning. He didn't resist. He hugged Noah once, then looked at me, the way a child looks, before saying sorry. But there was no word big enough to fit between us anymore. I only said, "Be brave," and he nodded, knowing what that meant. The days that followed passed like smoke through a window, soft, shapeless, and endless. Neighbors whispered. People left casseroles we didn't eat. The world wanted to comfort me with small talk, but grief has no appetite for kindness. Noah and I built our own routine: school, homework, late dinners, bedtime stories that didn't end in loss. He stopped asking when his mom would come home. He just said goodnight to her picture instead. Sometimes I catch him watching the window as the sun goes down. He doesn't cry anymore. Children heal differently. They grow around the wound instead of through it. At night, when the house falls still again, I sit in Emily's old chair by the window. The wind brushes the curtains the way it used to on quiet evenings before everything broke. It's strange how the body remembers peace even after peace is gone. On the table beside me is a box, plain, wooden, unmarked. Inside it, the last remains of everything that started this story. Emily's note, the ledger's key, the photo of David and Hale. I keep them not as proof, but as prayer. Sometimes I wonder if Emily would have forgiven me for not seeing sooner, for mistaking her silence as distance, her caution as anxiety. She'd been trying to shield us from a storm I couldn't even hear. There are nights when I still hear her scream in my dreams, "Run." Only now I know it wasn't fear she was shouting. It was love wearing the only armor it had left. Last week, a detective called. He said the investigation had ended, Hale's assets seized, charges filed. David's cooperation made the case airtight. They'd found Mark, too, alive, finally free of the shadows he'd been running through. He sent a letter. Not long, just a few sentences. Emily was the only one who believed I could still be good. Thank you for listening when she couldn't speak. Tell Noah his uncle kept his promise. I folded it and placed it inside the wooden box with the rest. Then I lit a candle, the way Emily used to when she prayed. The flame trembled at first, then steadied. That's what healing looks like, I think. Flicker before stillness. One evening, Noah found me sitting there. He climbed onto my lap, still small enough to fit, and looked at the candlelight dancing on the window. "Grandma," he asked, "why did Mommy tell me to run?" The question settled gently like dust on an old photograph. I thought for a long moment before answering. Because sometimes, sweetheart, love doesn't mean staying. It means keeping someone safe, even if it breaks your own heart. He nodded like he understood, and maybe he did in his own way. Then he leaned against my shoulder. The candle's glow painted his face in soft gold, the same light that once filled Emily's kitchen, and for a heartbeat, it felt like she was there with us again. The seasons turned quietly after that. Spring came with its stubborn flowers. The house began to sound like a home again, pans clinking, laughter returning in shy pieces. David wrote from prison once a month. His letters were short, repentant, almost childlike. He never asked for forgiveness outright, only for updates about Noah. I write back because forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a slow thaw. And maybe, when enough time passes, the river that took Emily might return something else in its place. Peace. Sometimes I still visit her grave. It's a small place under an oak tree where sunlight filters through in gentle stripes. I bring her favorite flowers, lilies, and sit until the shadows stretch long enough to touch my shoes. I don't talk much when I'm there. Words feel too small for what we lost and too heavy for what we've found since. But I always whisper one thing before I leave. He knows, Emily. He knows the truth now. You can rest. And in that moment, I swear the wind softens, like the world itself is exhaling with me. On nights when sleep won't come, I replay everything in my head, not as a tragedy, but as a lesson carved in light and shadow. What I've learned is simple, but it took everything to see it. Evil doesn't always kick down the door. Sometimes it wears your son's face. And love, real love, isn't the kind that hides the truth to keep the peace. It's the kind that opens the door anyway. The kind that screams, run not out of fear, but out of fierce, desperate hope that someone will make it far enough to build something better. The candle burns lower each night, but I keep lighting it again. For Emily, for David, for the parts of ourselves we lost and the parts we're learning to live with. And when Noah asks again someday why we keep that candle by the window, I'll tell him, so she can find her way home whenever she wants to visit. Because light remembers what love cannot forget. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending us super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect. If this story touched your heart, don't leave yet. Stay a little longer with me. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we find too late. If you believe every secret deserves light, leave A in the comments for Emily. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed. You never know which one might feel a little too real.